fly anglers, and thank you for joining us here at pikeonthefly.com on YouTube. Got a presentation here for you today, how weather and water temps shape opening day success, presented by Andrew Marr. That's me. And the goal is understanding preseason conditions to find pike on day one. Opening day is quickly approaching in a lot of Canada and the US here, and probably Europe as well. And every year, day one can be a little different. Just because you had success doing something on opening day last year doesn't mean the fish are going to be doing the same thing this year. And so when you may run into a variety of situations, and the goal of this presentation is to talk about a bunch of the factors that's going to affect them. Barometric pressure, late spring, early spring, ice on the lake, or big lakes, small lakes, things like that. We got a lot of information to cover here. I got a bunch of stories I'm going to share, and some of my experiences that I've had with a lot of opening day success and failures, to hopefully to make things a little easier on you. So we're going to get right into the slides here. Here's our opener. As you can see, I'm going to be down in the corner here for a lot of this, just so you can see all the information. Let's get into the first slide. Why weather matters to pike. Pike are cold-blooded ambush predators, as we all know. Metabolism, location, and aggression are directly controlled by water temperature and atmospheric conditions. Big pike especially, there's a lot of mass to them, and it takes a lot to warm them up and cool them down. And weather and barometric pressure and just seasonal movements are just huge factors in determining what they want to be doing, and we need to understand that to find them. So you've got just a few points to be, on being a cold-blooded fish. Their swim bladders, how that affects them here. Visual hunters, pike obviously, they're really sight-orientated. But they also have the bigger the fish, the bigger the lateral line, so they can really pick up movement. Sometimes, they don't always have to see a prey item or your fly to find it. Just something to be aware of. Okay, let's jump into the next one. Here's a bit more of a detailed breakdown about water temperatures and pike locations as spring progresses and the ice is coming off the lakes. And this is just a general breakdown of where you want to be looking and what those fish are going to be doing at different stages. So you have ice out at 34 to 39 degree as the ice is just coming off. Often those big pike just stage just outside their spawning bays where they want to be, and then as that ice is sliding off, they'll start moving up there, but they're not really ramped up when it's that, when the water's in the 30 degree range. They're not firing on all cylinders just yet. But once we get into the pre-spawn, the 40 and 50 degree, that's when that migration starts to happen. Bays, marshes, reed lines, shorelines, males arrive first, and then the feeding starts to get going a little bit. I'll interject here that the reed line shorelines may be something that you have in some southern waters, where I fish personally in southern Ontario. That is something that we'll look for a little bit. Where I guide up in northern Saskatchewan, that's not a factor. Early season way up north, weeds aren't factoring into it really. But in some of the more southern waters, I might be fishing last year's weeds, or if there's early emergent growth, that is going to be a factor. But weeds are that's not my go-to, but I generally want to be in the vicinity or be thinking about it. 50 to 56 degrees, that post-spawn period. Again, shallow weedy flats, if that's a factor in a southern water where you have early weed growth, yeah, check that out. In 5 feet and less, sometimes they're up in a foot of water, sometimes they're just out off that break a little bit. The females are recovering, and a slow presentation. I mean, this is a good time to go out and try and sight fish big pike and try and find them. And then once you have that 56 to 65 degree water, they're recovering. The pike get pretty beat up during the spawn, and they need a little bit of time to sort of heal a few wounds and get back into fighting strength. But this is a great time to catch trophy fish, some really big ones. I would say when I used to fish here in Southern Ontario as a kid, I would be looking at pike opener. I'd have generally about 2 weeks when those fish would stay shallow, and then once the water warms up, they started to pull out in front of the bays, and then that was then I just checked the bays a little bit here and there. But there's just a quick breakdown of some generally what you may expect based on the water temperature. Okay, here's our next slide, fronts and barometric pressure. And these are, again, this is sort of some general advice here, but you could apply this throughout a lot of the season, the impacts of these different fronts and pressure systems. So falling pressure, falling pressure, pike are going to go on a feeding frenzy. The longer period of stable weather that you have, the more impactful a front moving through will be. If you have a couple nice days, a front, a couple nice days, a front, a couple nice days, a front, that can get a little lessened. It's, when you have just a steady pressure system, and you're on, nice warm weather, when those fronts come through, that's a great time to be out there. Cold fronts are always a challenge, any time of year. But in the spring, and in general, they tend to slow down a little bit. They might become lethargic for 12 to 36 hours because their digestion is going to slow down. So if they have a fish in their belly, the temperatures are cold, their metabolism rate will slow down because they are a cold-blooded species. Rising stable pressure, clear skies, high pressure. This is sort of what we're talking about before a front. That stable weather, pike become parable with short feeding windows, dawn and dusk. Fish deeper structure and weed edges, and that's maybe a little later if you're in the spring period there. Sometimes if they're not shallow, you're always just checking out a little bit. Check those initial points, any weeds outside a spawning bay, or maybe a big laydown log. And warm front, south winds, gradually rising water temps push pike shallow. South or west winds increase feeding activity. Great pre-opener conditions. Okay, we're going to just keep on moving here. But there's just a breakdown, and you can apply these generally throughout the season. This just so you understand how fronts affect pike. Okay. Here we have the week before opening day, and this is a pretty detailed breakdown of what you may want to be doing, and this might be overkill for the average guy, but it's just to get you thinking about not just what the weather is on opening day. That's really not enough data or information to go off. I would really look at the previous week and what's been happening in the lead up. And there's just a few points here that you may want to consider. If you have an opportunity to get on the body of water that you plan on fishing ahead of time, just to go scout, take some water temperatures, maybe take a temperature in the morning and in the afternoon and see if there's a trend. An opening day, or temperature opening day, generally, what I'm doing is I'm just going to try and hit a lot of spots to find them, and I'm just taking a temperature wherever I go. I keep a fish finder with me of course, but I can tell you in the early season pike period, a fish finder is not to help you find fish. It's really just an expensive thermometer at that point. We're not so much worried about waypoints and trying to, find a weed bed because it's probably not a big factor. We're just trying to get up shallow, look for fish, check the temperature, see if there's a trend. But just, if you're trying to put a plan together, there's some really good information on this slide here that might just, help you get a game plan together and be successful. But that's you but look at the week ahead. Don't think of it as what the weather is on day one. Think of the week ahead. Okay. And we just have a few scenarios here, just rough scenarios of things you may run into. If you have a nice, warm, stable week, that's great because that generally means temperature is rising steadily, the bays are warming, and fish are probably moving in. If you have and you can get pretty aggressive there, cover water, work. Cold fronts are a little tougher. You generally are going to have to slow down and pull out a little bit. Generally, those fish aren't up real shallow. They'll be close to where you're hoping to find them, those dark bottom bays, the incoming water and things like that. But they may not be up tight. They could just be out in 5 feet of water. Late ice out, a cold spring, creek mouths, warm inflows, dark bottom bays. Again, you're looking for the warmest water, whatever with whatever you're faced. But generally, the main lake of a big body of water is going to be quite cold, and you're looking for a runoff coming into the lake, or big shallow bays, dark bottom bays, things that can absorb sun and just warm up at a steady rate. That's where those fish want to go. Post spawn recovery, that 50 to 55 degrees, fish just spawned. Yeah, and they're still going to be close to that spawning ground again, maybe just out a little bit. Bait fish, flies are great, things like that. But I'll tell you something here that I'm going to describe that I tell my guests all the time. And this is the story of Pike A and Pike B. So say you're out there on opening day, and you pull into a nice sandy bay and the sun's on it, and you may see 2 pike. They could be side by side each other, just like this. And we say, we're going to try and take a cast at this Pike A first. And what happens is, we see the fish, we make a nice cast, we get the fly in front of it, the fish comes, eats the fly, we hook them, we fight them, we land them, get our picture, everything's great. Generally speaking, if you were to then take the temperature of the active fish, his body temperature is going to be equal to or greater than the water that he's in. The reason they're going shallow in that sunny period is to get the sun on them, to raise their body temperature, to speed up digestion, have a poop, and then they're going to go back out, eat another meal, and repeat the process. Now, this fish had been in that bay for a little while. He had warmed up. He was active. He ate. Awesome. Now, Pike B, the guy that was sitting beside him, and you might look at these 2 fish. They could be the same size. They could be sitting in the same spot. But this time, we cast at this guy. We make a great cast. We work the fly, and maybe he doesn't react, and we try a few different flies. And no matter what we do, he doesn't react, or we spook him, and he goes off slowly and slinks off somewhere. If you took the temperature of this pike, chances are it's going to be lower than the temperature of the water that he's in. Again, we're talking about a cold-blooded animal, but this fish may have been out in deep, cold water. He wants to digest, he wants to go warm up, but he's just pulled into the bay and his temperature hasn't had a chance to warm up yet. So, sometimes you pull into a bay and you see 2 pike. 1 pike does exactly what you want it to do, and 1 pike does the exact opposite. Wildly different reactions. That's why sometimes you're going to get those reactions. It's just something to be aware. So, and again, this Pike B, you don't necessarily need to spend a ton, make a few good casts. If you've made a good presentation and he never shows any aggression or does anything to lead you to believe that he may eat that fly, move on and go find more Pike A's. Pike that are just going to chase. Those are the guys that are going to make your day. Okay, next we're going to keep going on the slides here. Fly selection by conditions. Again, we're talking in generalities here. But personally, a lot of my guiding, I like whistlers as my search flies. This is an Anderson's reducer. These are made by Umpqua. Great fly, and you can see the profile on it. There's a lot of sucker in the water that I fish. It's amazing how many pike I catch each season with big sucker tails hanging out. And wherever I fished pike, especially that has a big sucker population, this is a great fly. You have whistlers as well. They have some lead eyes. They can get down a little deeper. They're nice and flashy. You can see them. and they catch a lot of fish. But these in my books are great search flies. These are, if I don't know where the pike are, and I'm just trying to, as we say, sometimes you got to go pound shoreline. You just got to cast, and be methodical about your approach. These are the flies I'm generally going to use, or a bait fish even. Search flies, and then on my second rod, I'm always going to have probably a bunny leech or a seducer. I don't have a seducer here, but bunny leeches, and I carry a wide variety. You can see two bunny leeches here that are very, very different. One is quite big, and it has a much bigger epoxy head on it. So this guy's going to sink down a little bit deeper. Maybe I can twitch it in place more. But the last few years, I've also had outstanding results on really finicky fish with really downsizing the bunny leeches. And there are times I have two bunny leeches on a rod. I'm going to be searching, but I like to have a couple options. They just work well. And I also want to rule out a Monster Magic. This is probably a fly. Well, this is a fly that I will use from the very first day of the season to the very last day of the season, and it can double duty as a search fly and a finesse fly. You wouldn't think something so big could be finesseful, but I remember one opening day years ago, story time, where ice was still out on the main lake. We were up in a river system, and I was checking just bays, and it was really cold, and I wasn't necessarily expecting pike to be super shallow, but it was opening day, I hadn't had a chance to scout, so I just wanted to go physically look and see in the bays and see if there's any fish. And so I got the boat up into a couple feet of water, and I'm working around the edge of this bay, and I'm looking shallow, not seeing anything. But I just was trying to confirm if they're there or not. And I got the boat in a couple feet of water, and then as I'm pulling out to go check the next bay, I get out of that shallow water, and I start to move towards the channel and the first drop off. And I literally drove the boat right on top of a really big pike. And I didn't see it until it was almost halfway down the middle of this 18-foot boat. And I look over and I go, oh, that's a pretty big fish there. It hit reverse. I back off. Fish never moved, never spooked. I mean, the water's 40 degrees probably. And I tell my client, I grab that Monster Magic and try and lay it off its nose. And sure enough, the gentleman makes a nice cast, and that giant fly came down about 6 inches, and he just gave it a really subtle couple of twitches, and it was imperceptible how slowly this pike moved. But sure enough, that fish just moved a couple inches, opened its mouth, and sucked that fly back. So don't be afraid to use big flies on an opening day. That size in itself can be something that attracts them. But yeah, and the other lesson I would take away from that is, and something I do quite often when I'm guiding, is I will position the boat where I can see everything between the boat and the shoreline, so that if there's any fish in that area, if I can get the sun behind me, I'm going to see it. And quite often I can't necessarily see out the deep side of the boat. Maybe I'm looking into the sun, or it's just a little bit darker water, and I often have my guests casting out that side of the boat. And in that first scenario where we caught that big pike, my boat was in a pretty good position, but the fish weren't on that side. But if we're just casting out to the deep channel, sometimes that's all it takes is, your boat may be in the right position, but the fish are just on the deep side. So if you're not seeing them shallow, just check deep. Also gear, we could touch on the gear essentials that you want to be using. Generally my boat, it's always a 9 or 10 weight, 9-footer. Floating lines, when it's a little colder, you want to be a little bit deeper. Your intermediates are going to be fantastic. And leader, I'm a wire guy. I know there are people out there that like fluorocarbon or mono. I don't use it. I use tieable wire. My day in and day out is 26-pound test. If I want to be a little finesseful, if I'm doing something a little smaller, this is where I might use that 15 or 20 pound wire. And if I got a big fly and need to roll it over, that's where your 30 and 40 pound wire, something a little stiffer to help get it over. And I run a mono. I just make my own leaders, but I would suggest any leader that if you're comfortable with the leader, whether it's store-bought or you tie your own, as long as it can turn a fly over and it doesn't hurt your sink rate too much, I think you'll be just fine. Loop knots, I'm always tying loop knots. Those are great. And just to touch on, some different things to consider. Where I fish, as I said, it's a lot of suckers, burbot, whitefish, small pike. Those are probably the main things I see in pike's mouths, the tails that are sticking out. And that's sort of what I might try to replicate, or just silvery minnows, little ciscos and things like that. If you're on a heavy a perch water, lake that has a lot of perch, try some perch flies. Just suit it to what you need. But I'm also a big fan of any fly that's visible. That's why these bright yellow flies, I can see them at a distance. If they disappear, there's only one reason for that. That's a fish has it, and you're going to set the hook. But yeah, just so try a few different colors. Okay, we're going to get on to the next slide again here. Reading the water on opening day. Check your actual water temps. Don't use air temp. Air temp will help if you look back over the previous week, sort of give you an idea what the trend is. Again, this is all about sort of understanding weather patterns and if they're increasing or decreasing water temperatures. But more important than anything is checking water temperatures throughout the day. As we've said, just because it's cold in the morning, a spot could be loaded in the afternoon once that sun gets on it. Find the warm water. That's really just the name of the game. If you take one thing away from all this, is just find the warmest water that you can. Read the wind. I've had days where the pattern is fishing north-facing bays or south-facing bays, just based on what the wind had been doing all week and where it was pushing cold water. And sometimes, you have an island and, the north side was getting a bit of warmer water, or the south side, or whatever it is. But I have experienced that, where the pattern is just fishing bays based on the direction. And certainly into the summer, you're always trying to fish where the wind is blowing. But yeah, read the wind. You want to know where it's been blowing into. Watch for bait fish. Oh, I have some great days early in the spring where the shallows just load up with silvery little bait fish. And you pull into a bay and you're just seeing bait fish scatter, and there's pike just throwing themselves into it. So if you see that, stop and spend a little time. That's really, really fun. And just watch your depth transitions. If you're not seeing them shallow, just come out to the first break, the second break, just check there. As I said, if you don't see them one direction, check the other, check the breaks. Okay, so into the next slide here is choosing your water. And I thought this was important for people that trailer their boat. If you have options about deciding where you may want to go. I grew up fishing a big deep trout lake. You can see some of the things listed there that are attributable. That's often big fish water, but they can take a lot longer to warm up. So if you have a late spring and you can trailer your boat, you may want to go to a smaller body of water that they just warm up a little bit faster. The ice gets off. You can often have higher numbers versus those big deep trout lakes. Those deep waters generally have a smaller population, but some of the biggest fish. I didn't always have a chance to choose where I was going to fish, so I used to have to cover a lot of water to find not a lot of fish on the trout water that I fished, but I would catch pretty big ones. But that's depends if you just want numbers, or if if you're taking family or some kids or something like that. Numbers are always good. But that's something to consider if you trailer your boat and you got an option. Fishing small versus big water makes a difference. And then here we're going to the last slide now. Or actually, sorry, second last slide. High water versus low water years. I just want you to have a look at it. This is something that can really, especially on rivers, high water. God, I remember years. There's a big river I fish, and I remember years where you're really just pushing the boat into trees, and sometimes you can't access in those high water years. Sometimes you can't get to the fish because it floods some trees, or you basically flooded forest, and the fish are just back in there where you can't get a boat to them, and you can hear them splashing back there, but accessing them is tough. But there's just some good information on this slide to think about. Low water years are tough, or can be tough. Tough finding them, but again, fall back on your game plan, or find the warm water, find the dark bottoms, incoming water. Usually in those low water years, you can still find some spot that they're going to pile into, because at least in a low water year, they're forced out, and they're still going to be accessible. High water years, they may not be accessible. Just because you really can't get at them. But there's just some good information on that, and it's something you may run into and want to think about. At the bottom line here is that, it's a little covered, but high water scatters pike into new cover. Go to them if you can find them and get to them. Low water concentrates pike on remaining structure. Let them come to you, which is sort of funny. You have to find them. Anyway, so now we're on to the last slide. We can wrap this up here. And this is the opening day game plan. This is just a few rough points just to keep in mind, to sort of keep you focused here. Track your water temps like we said. Watch the barometer. We talked about how that can influence what their mood is. Again, I've said this time and time again. Hopefully, it's not too repetitive. But find the warm water. That's the goal. Match flies to your conditions. We talked about that a little bit, and match them to what works on your local waters or what you have confidence in. Sometimes just throwing a fly that you're confident in. That's half the battle right there. If you believe you got a good fly on, stick with it. Dawn to dusk. I love early in the season. I like when the sun comes up. You can have a little bite window if the water temperature is up. You had an early spring. Early in the morning is really good. But a lot of times, 3 o'clock, that 3 to 4 o'clock window. I've had years where we didn't catch a big fish until 3 o'clock in the afternoon on those sunny days when the sun has been on it long enough that the water came up in the pike, where the big pike came off that first ledge and they moved up into shallow water. I love late afternoon in the spring. And stay flexible. Just remember, just because what you were doing last year was working and you found them, the natural reaction the following year is to go back to those same spots. But if they're not there, you want to have a game plan. And that's the whole purpose of this, is just to there's a lot of information here, but hopefully you can have some good takeaways to make a game plan for yourselves, so that if you're struggling a little bit, you got some information here as to where to check and how to find them. That's all we have for you here today. Thank you for watching. If you've stuck this long through the video, thank you. And I hope it pays off for you. Tight lines out there. Hope you catch a big one. And thanks for visiting us at pikeonthefly.com. Take care.